I read an article in December of 2011 by Tom Standage, who writes for The Economist, entitled How Luther Went Viral. And the article talks about Martin Luther and the use of the printing press invented by Johann Gutenberg, and comparing that to the use of social media in today's world of social, political, and cultural change. And so I was interested in looking at that context of that article and how it might be interpreted to reform museum practice through social media. I look to Luther as an example of someone who's a reformer. He was looking at his world, he saw things that troubled his conscience, and wanted to speak out to change the paradigms of his community. Luther used, like with Gutenberg's printing press, or took advantage of the technologies of his day to grow and share ideas with a new community of followers. Luther observed practices that troubled his conscience and was ready to change the paradigms of his world. He had an awakening, or an Aufbruch. Like Luther, I had an awakening that museums need to use social media to share information, inspire expression, encourage dialogue, and foster compassion. It's critical that museums use social media to share responsibility with the public for the fundamental operations of museums. So museum information, when it's shared with the public through dialogue, becomes woven into a person's daily stream, into their digital memory. And when museums share information and help people inspire expression and engage in dialogue, they realize that the essential function of museums is to foster compassion. So museums need to operate daily with compassion for their staff and for the public. A commitment to compassion is a vital virtue of the museum's identity as a service institution. With compassion, museums affirm ideas about human dignity, openness, and a spirit of generosity. And with that sense of compassion driving museums, they recognize that the future of their institutions require a shared responsibility with the public for a fundamental operation of museums. So museums will share responsibility with the public in digital humanities centers. And digital humanities centers would be the heart of the museum. Digital humanities combines both an interest in technology and a focus on using a social experience into its methods of research and inquiry. Its principles are based on a democratic ethos that is reliant upon conversation, dialogue, and sharing. The staff in a digital humanities center can come from education departments, from libraries, from archives, from curatorial. It really requires a multiple voice and multiple vision for the functioning of a center to be interconnected in a network across the institution. The center has to be agile. It has to be able to move within the physical space of the museum, but also have a fluidity online, and really be connected to the different layers of data and systems and information to bring this collective sense of knowledge and understanding to the museum as a whole. So the Digital Humanities Center should really also be driving the public face of administrative information of museums. And one way to do that is through public online dashboards. One example of that is the Indianapolis Museum of Art has an online dashboard where information about deaccessioning practices, about provenance, about daily operational information is publicly posted on the web for people to engage and understand and experience. And this is really important to demonstrate to the public transparency and an openness with the museum, and it's a visible sign that these are values that the museum has. Digital humanities centers, I think, will also be responsible for kind of reshaping curatorial practice and interpretation and opening up that dialogue for research. And I think this happens primarily first with objects through the collections database space online. That's the portal for interaction. So there we'll see curators and researchers working together to tag collection items, to co-author text about collection objects, to write comments, and to create a sustained dialogue and relationship around the collection or museum resources. And this includes having symposiums together through chat online. And it also includes having peer-reviewed texts that are online and open access, and having these comments and dialogues continue over time, so that a text or object information isn't understood to be fixed but fluid. Just as we learn more information from dialoguing with one another, so too information about objects becomes more rich and nuanced and engaged. The reach of the Digital Humanities Center also goes into exhibitions. So public exhibitions are the core way that museums, along with publications and research, manifest their public face. So public involvement with exhibitions through social media would include picking exhibition themes, maybe helping to design the physical space, selecting objects for the exhibition, recommending scholars or contributors to be involved with the project based on their own knowledge and working experience. We've seen some success with this already with exhibitions related to photography, but also to permanent collection gallery installations. When there's a show change or construction work, sometimes museums may use permanent collection space as kind of an experimental working space for these kinds of public interactions. But I think this has to become an essential practice and part of every museum exhibition. So the public involvement is there from the beginning through the end and continues throughout the life of the exhibition's work. The next example where this applies is with museum publications. I think it's very important for our digital world today that museums primarily cease making printed publications and that their primary access point for knowledge is the internet. You may experiment with native applications, such as an iPad app or an iPhone app, but it's important to make information of the museum's collection and its resources available to the widest possible audience through technology. In the process of writing publications, too, it's important to have open peer review, open commentary, and a dialogue with the public throughout that process. And it'll be critical as well to think about digital preservation of these texts, about these codices on the online space, and how they're preserved over time, just as we want to have access to them not only a few years from now, but decades from now or centuries from now, as we continue to build upon this networked world of information. Another critical element that digital humanities centers and social media will lead is in outside collaborations. Art museums, for example, may invite a guest artist to do a lecture or create an installation or do an education program, or scientists could come into a natural history museum and do research with curators there, scientists there. And sometimes these collaborations are documented in ways that are outside of the museum's network knowledge, and they exist in small pockets within the institution, but they're not linked to the collection itself, or they may not be accessible outside of a video clip here or the recording of a text from a lecture. So it's really important to have those outside collaborators agree at the beginning of the process with their rights and permissions and with their understanding of the collection, that they integrate those collaborations in to the greater fabric of the museum. One of the aspects we need to address is restrictive copyright practices. It's very important in a digital culture for the public to be able to share their own information, as well as the museum sharing its information and creation with the public. We have all these digital tools that allow us to copy and mix and share and create, and this is where we see dialogue happening, is through this creation and sharing together. And that's where we begin to see the connections we have with other human beings and build those compassionate and empathetic relationships. And one of the ways we can do that with technology is by using Creative Commons licenses, which allow us to give both attribution to creators, but also give us the freedom and the technological ability to share in an online space. This is especially important as well, not only with public domain works or information, but also information that's controlled by 20th and 21st century rights holders. We need to, as museums and the public, have a dialogue and a reconciliation about these tensions and focus on a humanitarian good, which emphasizes thoughtfulness for other human beings, which emphasizes generosity, openness, and compassion as the reason why we create and why we share and why we collect as museums. Just as Martin Luther recognized that it was time for a fundamental paradigm change for his society, and he used the technology of his day, the printing press, to reach new followers and share ideas, I'm trying to do the same thing with social media and museum reform, and share these ideas of openness and generosity and dignity to reform museums and make them more accessible to the public. We live in an interconnected world because of this digital technology, and it's bringing us into closer relationship with one another. And we're having a rich, engaged experiences daily. And if we want museums to be part of that experience, we have to share that knowledge, that information, to build dialogue and foster compassion. So as Martin Luther said, "Here I stand. I can do no other. My conscience has been moved to speak, and I hope that you'll join me in reforming museums for the 21st century in a digital culture with social media." Thank you.